Oh, helps if I. Welcome to the new media show. We're back.
Doing the new media show again.
People are actually going to listen to this junk.
We do it live.
We're live right now.
We'll just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live. We just can't get enough. The new media show.
Let's go.
Just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live.
Bada bing, bada boom.
The new media show. We do it live.
Just do it live.
We're going live. We're going live. We're going live. The new media show. I'm like Adam Curry, and you're more like John C. Dvorak.
I think I am Adam Curry, and you're the old curmudgeon.
We do it live. Doing the new media show again.
The new media show.
Technology.
We make it sound so special. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the new media show. Of course, welcome to my co-host, Mr. Rob Greenlee. Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing terrific, Todd. It's great to be here. Yeah, great to be back doing the show.
So, big things going on in the world, and it is affecting podcasting a little bit.
Of course, anything that happens in the world ultimately affects podcasting to some degree, right?
Yep. So I don't know
It's just a reflection of what's happening in the world.
Yes. Right? So I don't know about you guys, but I'm fielding emails from Russian podcasters that have been cut off from their financial institutions that are trying to figure out how they are going to pay their hosting bills.
Crazy. Yeah.
And it's not a flood yet, but it's a steady trickle of shows that are coming up on, we do our renewals as they come up in the month. And so we actually had to have a meeting about it.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so we went and actually looked, and what we are doing is we're looking at each show, and if it's just a podcaster, then if they're doing a tech show, if they're doing a science show, or whatever it may be,
right,
we're trying to help them figure out a way to make a payment. And but thus far, I have not run up against any political commentary, news, organizational podcasts that would be spreading misinformation. So we're doing case by case on figuring out what to do. Have you guys run into this over there yet?
I haven't heard about it directly, but then of course I'm not that much involved in the support side, so I wouldn't necessarily hear about things like that too much, just because of our organization and how it works.
Right.
But I'm not surprised. I know a lot of those financial institutions have been kind of squeezed, and
they got squeezed. They shut them off.
Yeah.
Right.
Things are getting a little crazy in the world right now.
Yeah,
I guess it's been that way for a while.
So
actually, in a lot of ways,
and the way we kind of looked at it was, some people have just pulled out completely, and I understand the thoughts there, but I would imagine the majority of content creators, first of all, if they're willing to do a podcast right now in Russia, and they're probably being very, 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 very careful on anything they say.
Well, my son actually lives in Sochi, Russia, so I've been talking to him too. I mean, he's got two kids that are dual citizens. So I've done I think last week I was on like an hour and a half call with him, talking about what's going on there, because he's actually within probably an hour and a half of the Ukraine border. So he's not really seeing much where he's at, but I think that the interesting thing about it is what the Russian citizens are being told,
right,
in their media about what's going on in Ukraine. There's some discrepancy between what they're being told and what we're seeing in the media. So that's what I kind of talked to him about. I go, are you sure what you're being told? And I mean, his comment is that he doesn't really trust anything that he's hearing. So, and I think that's probably a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
There's, just like anything else, there's agendas, right? You're going to be told what somebody wants you to know, right? So unfortunately, that's the situation. But I am a little worried about him. He's in a country where he doesn't really have citizenship.
Mhm.
So, so
So
but
he
that's a
has to be
complicated-
really careful. Doesn't
Yeah.
want to get on the radar of anyone, obviously.
Yep.
So, that's the risk you run when you live in any country that has there isn't, to an extent, there is not free
Right.
speech.
Right.
And,
Well, his whole profession is he's an English teacher. So he's teaching English to people in Russia and people that are non-English speakers. So yeah. So he's kind of caught in the middle of that. So he's doing a lot of online stuff. But anyway,
yeah,
we
so,
should talk about podcasting a little bit more.
yeah. So, I think from going back to those content creators, a lot of those
Yeah.
those folks have gig workers, everything else have been cut off because of the cancel. But I don't know. It's one of those things where you're trying to make sure that you're not the source of misinformation going out, but at the same time, if it's an independent podcaster that's not part of a Russian news agency like RT or somebody like that, then we don't have any of those types of accounts. I'm sure someone does, but I guess it does raise an interesting thing. Most people would say cut them all off, and
Right.
and again, that it gets tricky there when you're, especially when you have, and part of it too is like, some have asked their audience members to pay the bill that live outside their country to make sure that their
right.
service stays online.
Right.
Because they have no way to pay. MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, Amex have all,
Cut.
they've
Wow.
been cut. So they can't pay their bill even if they wanted to. So that therein lies the challenge. But I wondered if it was going to pop up, and the first ticket came in a couple days ago, and I was like, oh.
Mhm.
And I said, well, we're going to have a discussion about this. But it's definitely a interesting time, but probably more interesting is the announcement that came out this morning about YouTube. YouTube podcast going to be at Podcast Movement.
Oh, good. Good.
They're
I
gonna-
hadn't heard that yet. So that's awesome news. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, they're going to be a special session. They're going to have a
Like a keynote, kind of a fireside chat.
I don't know if it's going to be a keynote or something, but it makes you go, You know anything about that, Rob? Anything about YouTube?
Well, YouTube has been involved in podcasting for a very long time. It's just to what extent is really the question at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see what they announce. I don't have any inside track into anything that I can even mention here. So
Right.
yeah. So I think it's good. Whether or not it's really part of YouTube
Right.
is the question, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not really video, right? So
No. So,
Right.
And they're talking about offering podcasters up to $50,000 in startup costs to do video. Well, you look at this, that ain't going to cover it.
no. Well,
For
for some, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's not that expensive to get a SLR camera and get an adapter that
But if
plugs
it's
in.
it depends if it's a solo show or multiples or,
Yeah, I think it gets back to the bigger topic of and we've been talking about this off and on the show, is the professionalization of podcasting is definitely in full swing, and that involves video too. I think more and more creators are, doing that, adding video to what they're doing. I know, we've been doing it with this show for a very long time. It's just, I just think more creators are using like a Riverside or a StreamYard or even Zoom to some degree to do their whole recording and production. Take the audio out of that, take the video out of that, and guess what? You've got a complete show. So, yeah.
Yeah, so time will tell on how this develops, but it's just like everyone's on the podcasting bandwagon right now, and they got to get a piece. So it is an interesting interesting that they're going to be coming and talking, being that we have heard nothing from Google Podcasts. So it looks to me like Google Podcasts is just pretty much extinct. It's by name only. But
yeah. It's hard to say. It's not gone away. It's
No.
just doesn't appear that it's making any significant forward progress at this point. But that just could be a matter of time before we see that. But one of the topics I wanted to talk about on the show today was Tom Webster's article from last Friday talking about podcast advertising. I don't know if you read that article.
I didn't read it, but I got the gist from the tweets I saw.
Right. About and this is an alarm that you and I have been raising in the podcast space for a couple of years now, because we were starting to see glimpse in the Edison research that at the time, this is an honest perspective on it, that it was being downplayed in the data, but it was clearly a trend line that was starting to form around audiences starting to object to ad load in podcasting. And I think at the time we actually expressed that. We said, I think it is time for us to start paying attention to this, and realizing that there is a threshold here that once we cross, then we start offending audiences and going against what the foundation of this medium was really built on, is less commercialism. Right.
It's a.
I mean, I'm not against advertising.
No,
I'm just against too much of it.
Well, I wish a whole bunch of people would start just beating the drum here, because I've been beating this drum for.
I know you have.
10. Oh my God, a long time. On basically this ongoing refusal for media buyers to look down. They look at the They look at the 3%,
right,
and they ignore the 97 the other percent. And really, that's not 97; it's more like 47%, because 50% of shows don't want any advertising. So it's about 47% that probably could use some take mama to dinner money or car payment money or whatever it may be. Their partner, whatever it is, and so they've gotten complacent in saying, well, we'll just add more load to
the existing
stuff. And, it's, and guess what? Most of those folks that are running shows with these heavy loads are corporate shows. They're big corporations. They don't care. I'm going to say this. They don't care about the listener. They care about how many ads are going to be in that content, just like television. They really don't care about the audience. The hosts may, but the hosts have no choice on the majority of those shows that have heavy ad loads. Or the hosts are, well, let's just be frank. Ching, ching, cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. Ring the cash register, right? I don't blame anyone for wanting to make money for their show. But if you're running 3 pre-rolls, 4 pre-rolls, 2 or 3 mid-rolls, and your ad load 7 or 8, or whatever it may be at the upper end,
right?
Come on. You're now impacting, whatever way you want to put it, you're impacting your audience. And the effectiveness of the ads has to be going down, because I would be hitting fast forward 30 seconds. Bing, 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 till I got into where they were talking. And then as soon as they went to another, I'd get so pissed off, I'd hit fast forward 30 seconds again.
Right. And the more kind of commercial podcasts out there, procasts or whatever you want to say, corporate podcasts come in there. Those type of organizations typically have a higher priority around revenue, right? So that drives a interest in driving as much revenue as you can from the content. It's the same thing that's been happening in video, same thing that's been happening on YouTube. It's the same thing. It happens everywhere. And in commercial radio, look how many minutes of advertisements in commercial radio. It's up to 16 minutes an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot if you think about it. I mean, can you imagine, Todd, having 16 minutes of ads in an hour-long podcast? It's beyond comprehension that would be an acceptable thing to do. But is that the direction this is going?
Well, until the media buyers start looking down, that's
Right.
what's going to be the case.
Buying across larger numbers of shows diminishes the pressure to load up on the existing smaller pool of shows that they're currently buying. Right. I agree with you.
But most of them can't see the grass from the trees. It's...
Yeah, but is it up to us really to develop technologies that make it easier for them to do that? And I do believe that the industry is pushing in that direction. I think, obviously programmatic helps and hurts at the same time. The programmatic ad buying platforms does democratize buys across larger numbers of shows because it makes it easier. But yet it also makes it easier to overload too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other end of that spectrum.
It's a situation where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And in my opinion, I've lost faith in media buyers to buy into smaller shows, a normal host read ad. They just, we did it for, the beginning. This is the thing is, I don't have to go over people listening to the show know that this is what we did. What my company did in the early days. We have 400 or 500 shows on an ad buy. And it was,
I remember those days.
And I managed it, did the spot checks, did the reporting, sent out the weekly status reports. We built a system to do that.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, because this isn't happening anymore, I've kept a low priority on updating my system because if it's not bringing in a number, a significant number of year, I'm not going to put dev resources. It works. It's still there, but it hasn't had a GUI update or anything, So, I am working on other stuff, but it's where we think we can make an impact. But
yeah, and I do think that what's happening right now is the convergence of all of the types of podcast advertising. Now you've got the baked-in host reads. You've got dynamically inserted capable host reads. You've got pre-recorded dynamically inserted, which is part of programmatic. And you combine all those together, and I have to admit, there's a lot of revenue opportunity there for larger shows, right? If
larger
you load
shows,
them up, right? If you load them up, and then on top of that, some of the listening platforms want to add, their own pre-roll to what you're doing,
right?
So there's
Spotify.
There's pressure. It's not just Spotify, but there's pressure for the listening platforms to monetize, as well as the programmatic stuff usually lives with the hosting platforms, and then the baked in or the dynamically inserted host reads are also part of the hosting platforms too. But you combine all those together. So let's say you have an early mid-roll with 2 15 or 30-second spots, and then you have a host read, a baked in or dynamically inserted host read at the midpoint of the content. That's probably a minute and a half. And then you get a couple at the toward the middle of the end of the episode with a couple of 15 to 30-second spots, and you've got 4 or 5 minutes of ads in your show, and that should be about the maximum that any show should have.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, it just seems like it's starting to show up in the research data, and I think Tom was right to call attention to it. I think it's been coming, and it's time.
But the question is, will it change anything? So I think
I think for some companies, I don't think it will. I think for other ones that really care about their audience, it depends on who their customers are.
Yeah.
I mean, it really comes down to that. Who's your customer? Is it the listener or is it the advertiser?
I suspect that the only thing that will make a podcaster or audience let me start this over. The only thing will make a podcaster change the ad load is when they start losing listeners. That's the only thing that's going to drive a change in this.
Yeah, but how are they going to know when the advertising load does that versus maybe a topic or content that they covered that wasn't as interesting?
I think that it's pretty easy to see. I know my show, my tech show,
Mm-hmm.
when I was running 70 minutes, I could do 2 ads and not have pushback from the audience. As soon as I went to 3, they become very vocal, and I actually saw my numbers drop off, people leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that my show that I do can handle 2. And that's what I'm running right now. I'm running 2 ads.
Mm-hmm.
I'm running a pre and a mid. And
got it.
so that's it. That's all and the pre is 30 seconds. Sometimes it's 15. And then the mid is the standard host read that is baked in. So I know my show. And if you're a paid podcaster and it's not your show, you're just, because some of these folks they are paid talent for a group. So they really are just, like, unlike you and I are the owners, the producers, the creators. We're the general motor and we're the talent. Our general manager, we're in the talent. We're everything.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a podcaster that is maybe on contract to do a show for a couple of years, they're paid talent. They do what they're told. They don't care about the audience thing may not be as important to them. So
yeah. Plus, Todd, I'm hearing more and more shows talk about, speaking about audiences and growing audiences. I think that we've reached a threshold, I think, where some podcasters are starting to think that the only way that they can grow to large audiences now is if they run paid advertising. I don't know if you've started to hear that as well.
That is okay. Good luck with that. If you're a brand new podcaster and you are,
well, I'm not saying brand new ones, but ones that have a show that if it had more exposure, it would grow, right? So I think it's
run paid advertising for their show,
right? Advertising their show on other podcasts.
Oh well, right? Yeah, we talk about that a little bit, where you do an episode dump where we dump someone else's show into our feed.
Well, that's part of that, right? That's part of it, but literally running an ad in a group of other shows that are probably in your genre that are compatible, but not
if you can get them to run
the ad, right?
Yep.
I've heard some cases that are talking about that. I know Jordan Harbinger of the Jordan Harbinger show. He spends like $40,000 a month on advertising his show,
right? And
he's been able to scale his audience quite large and get a multi-million-dollar contract on doing that. So it helps to have a lot of revenue coming in before you do that. Also, you're doing a bunch of investment in ad buying in the hopes that you're going to grow your audience. But I think it gets back to, you have to evaluate, are you going to spend, $10,000 to run ads in your show? You need to be pretty confident that the show that you're producing will pick up audience based on that.
I have
found you're throwing your money away.
I have found it very hard to get other podcasters to advertise other podcasts. And the only way you can do that is if they are part of a network and the network takes the ad. Individual podcasters generally say, no, I don't want to advertise another show. Right. So
I tend to agree with that. I think that's one of the core values of being a part of a network, right? Is that ability to cross promote.
Well, it's not just that. It's he's not just cross promoting within a network. He's buying into other networks.
Other shows.
But he's not,
Other networks, right?
I bet he's not doing it into a. I don't bet he can't go. He couldn't come to us. He could come to us and say, Todd and Gerard, will you run my promo for my show? Will you run an ad spot? You and I might say yes, because it's not a different. It's a different genre. But most shows are very. I've had very little success in running. You know,
especially on the promo swaps, right? I think if you think about the history of it, I know you tried to do it in the early days too, of running promo swaps. But those were free exchanges.
That's right.
You run it in mine, I'll run it in yours.
Yep.
And both people hopefully get a benefit out of it. The question gets back to, is any show that you advertise on another show, it needs to be fairly non-competitive, but the same type of listener, right? So the goal there is to get that listener to that other show to add your show, right? Not replace the other, right? So if you can, add two, then that's a benefit for both podcasts, because the show that's running the ad gets the benefit of the ad buy, and then the show that's buying the ad picks up a new listener. But
again, going back to Joe Smith comes to me with or Sally, or whoever comes to me, show XYZ comes to me and says, we want to buy into shows of our genre. And then I go and dig out the 50 or 100 that I think would be a good fit. And then we approach those 50 or 100 podcasts and say, hey, XYZ wants to do an ad in your show. And I mean, rarely do I get enough shows to justify running the ad, because most of those say no. Whereas if you're an individual that wants to advertise another podcast and you go to the network decides the network just tells the host, you have to run the ad.
Right.
And whether you like it or not. So that is where probably people are buying in. I don't buy into this idea that if someone came to me and said it was another tech show and wants to advertise in my tech show, I'm going to be looking at that tech show very closely. Number one, do I trust that person? Do I want to be aligned? Can I endorse? What's the impact going to be? I've been in the space long enough that I would probably run the ad, but most podcasters are not in a position or in the same mindset that I am in understanding the value, where I would probably tell that podcaster, sure, I'll do a swap with you. Let's do a swap. Let's not do you don't have to buy in. Let's just do a swap. But then you get the thing where maybe the other person doesn't want to do a swap.
Yeah, that's true. So, Todd, what are you hearing about Twitter and podcasting?
Just the same rumors you did.
And then, LinkedIn, there's rumors around them, and then there's stuff brewing around TikTok, and there's lots of interesting things that are being speculated right now. And then you throw into the mix YouTube on top of that. So, I mean, you're right. Podcasting is kind of a hot thing right now.
It's everywhere,
right?
And it's starting to narrowcast too. And we already predicted this, that it would start going into apps that had science, music, whatever the general topicality. They would start bringing in a line,
gender aligned apps, themed apps, all that stuff. I think is the next thing, because we're getting very close to large platform saturation here. I think we'll be in that probably within the next year or so. Where do you go from there? Niche.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Time will tell where it leads.
Right. That's true.
And to be honest with you, it's just like I'm watching what's going on with the space, but I'm more focused right now on, making sure that individual podcasters have the tools they need to grow their shows.
Yeah.
It's a serious issue. It's the most serious issue for for your independent content creator. How do I grow my show?
It's the number one question.
Number one by far.
And then after that is, how can I make money doing the show?
I don't hear that as
Those two
much.
topics are related to each other,
Yeah.
right?
And I do see some shows that I've been talking to recently that they're preparing for advertising. They know they're going to have it at some point, and they're
I
starting
think
to do
that's
pre-planning on shows that have
yeah,
enough vision. Are
yeah,
thinking about, okay, let's make sure we have the core right, and then let's maybe 5 months from now think about can we move
right.
into advertising.
I agree with that philosophy. I think some shows start that would never, like, a good example is this one. You know, we don't we don't aggressively go after advertising,
No,
but I think we're open to it. But I
sure,
just don't think we aggressively go after it.
no,
And I don't think we ever have really
mm-mm.
focused on that. But um, I think it's not a bad strategy to say, I want this show to generate revenue at some
Mm-hmm.
point, and I'm going to build in markers, or I'm going to build in transitions between segments that at some point maybe can be plugged into programmatic advertising at some point.
Right.
Um, I think programmatic advertising isn't so much um, should be demonized as a bad platform. It's not so much a technology issue. It's more it's really easy to add too much, and I think that's really where the issue is. And I think that the host reads is really the foundation of podcast advertising because of the authenticity elements of it and the believability elements. I think regular pre-produced ads are lacking that, and I think that the advertiser realizes that, and they're willing to pay a little less for that. So, but it's going to be interesting to see, and it's a content question too. And I know we've talked about that a lot over the years too. Is how are these ads produced? I don't know what you think about that now, Todd, as we move into this more advanced stage.
I really don't have an answer for it at this point.
Yeah, I think each show has to evaluate it for themselves. I did also notice, and you saw it in the headlines too, about Amazon with their, I guess they have a live radio app that they're working on called AMP. So it's interesting what Amazon's up to.
Yeah, it's. I got a email from somebody at, well, I won't say who, and they were mightily upset that they couldn't participate in the podcast awards because they don't have an RSS feed. And they said, we're a podcast. And I'm like, well, not by definition. My definition, you're not. But,
Right.
they were bamboozled, and they didn't really know. They didn't even know. The person I was talking to was a PR person. They didn't even know that, an RSS feed is the heart of podcasting. So,
Really? That seems a little odd, doesn't it, to you?
well, if you're working for a company that doesn't have RSS feeds and you call everything you're doing within your platform a podcast, well, you don't. Because you're thinking,
Yeah.
well, we have podcasts. What are you talking about? We have
Yeah,
podcasts.
I guess it. Yeah, I mean, Todd, I guess it really speaks to the same thing that Tom Webster's been saying for a long time about podcasting, is that it's, the perception of the medium has expanded to
Yeah.
include
Yeah.
non RSS based distribution.
Yeah.
And that's just I think that's just a fact of reality now that we just
Yeah.
have to accept. I mean, even though we don't really like to accept that, but
And I don't necessarily like to turn down their money, because we can
right,
use but at the
right,
same point, I think it's good to try to stay as pure as we can, as long as we can.
yeah, yeah. So, Todd, have you been thinking all about this James Boggs and team project, the Spooler project, about what they're up to?
Not to be kind of frank, it was interesting to read the article. We talked a little bit about it last week, but
Yeah,
I'm like, it's a niche product for a niche group of podcasters that will. I think they built something that largely doesn't need to exist.
yeah.
That, and I'm just kind of being frank. Here's the. I've been in this space long enough.
Right.
I have built products for the 3% or 2% or 1%.
Right.
And guess what? You can't make no money
Right.
when you build for the 2% or 1% or 3%. You can't make no money. Now, if your business model is working with the top 3% of shows, that's a different story.
Right.
But if you're building a feature, you're building a platform to only take care of the top 1 or 2%, or not even top 1 or 2% of shows that might be able to use this, it's going to be short lived.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I mean, what's fascinating about it to me is that it's really tapping into something that I've realized about dynamic insertion for a long time, is that it can be utilized for more than just ads, right? It can be utilized for more than just advertising. And I think that's kind of a little bit of the concept that they're going with here, is being able to kind of thread this line between how we've basically experienced public radio, right? So when you think of the top of the hour news with public radio, right? It's been segments of stories, right, that are streamed together, that are kind of read by an announcer back to back, right? So I think what they're somewhat replicating here is the ability to be real time with news updates, and to be able to feed content into this engine that dynamically, stitches together content to create episodes that are almost real time. I think it's almost like a way to thread the line between live content and on-demand content.
But again, I don't need that. Because unless they're going to back it up with a service that keeps feeding curated content that will go into my content continuously, I can't manage that. I don't have time to manage that. Now, what they've done, believe it or not, is no different than maybe even Anchor system, where you can have a clip library. You record your content, and you use the clip in your clip library to make the rest of your show. So that has existed for a while, and you guys have got a new product that you guys bought that allows you to build a show with a clip library and all that stuff. This is not difficult. You just have to build the UI UX to be able to put these pieces together and melt, basically stitch them together, and you've got an episode. The only difference that they added to that was the same episode being updated with new content throughout the day. But they're betting on that people are clicking play and not subscribing. Because if you're subscribed, you're going to get one piece. You're not going to get an updated episode. There's no way to re-trigger
a refresh
download. Right. A refresh download.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're just clicking play. If you're just clicking play and not caching anything,
that's different.
You are going to get a different episode, right?
Tom says, in our research, we don't count shows that don't have an RSS feed as a podcast.
Tom Webster had a great point. Huh? Wait, what? That phrase makes me nervous.
So, yes, thanks, Tom, for your input from the...
Thanks, Dave. Right.
So, no, I think what they build is cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it will evolve and fit into the market.
Can I license it? That's what I want to know. I'll just license it. And make it available to the, to the 10 or 15 shows that might be in my, my repertoire that would want this. Because it's not going to be that many. So maybe that's the play. Maybe I go and say, hey, let me license it. You guys provide me a white label for this, and we'll drop it in our system.
I mean, in concept, I guess it's similar to like the Daily or the Gist or anything like that. You can kind of see how it would be kind of similar to that, right?
But again, the Daily, they got a staff, but
I know
they're not going to sit. They're not going to sit there and rebuild that thing 10 times a day.
But they could, right?
They're not.
If they had enough talent and producers that could
But-
bang out a 2 or 3 minute segment that could be added to the feed.
But who cares? Make a new episode. Don't.
Well, but you are actually.
No,
right?
you're not. You're not
Well, you're
making.
kind of.
Nope. Only for the people that press play.
Right. So you got to build enough scale to make this work.
Right. So again, if they want to license it to me, drop me an email. Well, I'll look at licensing it on a per show basis, not because I'm not going to buy 100 show license and then have 3 shows use it. That's the model.
Yeah.
So I
guess there's the danger of that, right? I agree with you that this caters to a certain format. But I think they're thinking this caters. I'll say wouldn't have done it. They think this caters to a much larger potential pool of shows.
Well, they needed to hire
wants to produce content and publish content in segments and dynamically stitch them together.
They should have hired the Todd and Rob consulting company, and we would have consulted them and saved them a lot of pain.
Well, they've got a good team there that knows podcasting.
This is why I don't understand why they build it. It boggles my mind.
I mean, they've got Andy Bowers,
great guy.
He's a great guy, very knowledgeable about podcasting. Been in the public radio side, been on, worked with Slate and has built news podcasts and worked with all that stuff. Dan Benjamin.
The only way this works is if it costs $5,000 a month to use, and they have 100 clients that use it. That's it. It has to be priced so high to make it work.
Right.
That's the key.
And I see that they're doing sound optimization with Dolby I/O too.
Okay, I've tested that.
I know. We talked about this last week, didn't we? Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I did with Dolby. Sorry. We sent them over a number of clips, unproduced, produced. And we had them run it through their thing. And they sent them back to us. And I had everyone listening, doing A, B, A, B, A, B. Sorry. My money's on Auphonic, not on Dolby.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to argue with that. That's for sure. So I guess this tool that they built could be used to, update your RSS feed dynamically, with a separate episode all day long.
It could.
Or I suppose it could be assembled into, let's say, 4 segments, 5 segments into one episode, right?
Could be.
Right. So there's, how could that be used with an existing show, right? Is there something that that this could be utilized in for, let's say, this show?
Rob,
is there something that might work for this show?
I work.
I'm not sure.
I work 9 to whatever.
Right.
Dawn to dusk.
Right.
No, I don't. I have a hard enough time getting this show done, getting it produced, and getting it out within 24 hours. This is something where you have to have your pulse. You have to be on it. You got to have the browser opened up, and you have to have a source of content coming again.
It caters to larger media companies.
Yep, and it does. But again, how many people are going to follow or subscribe to those shows, and then just getting it automatically? And I know what the numbers are; they're not as great as they used to be, but still, about 40% globally. About 40% of podcast listeners globally follow or subscribe to a show, and it's downloaded automatically, completely, 100% delivered within 2 or 3 hours of the episode being released.
Yeah, that's true.
The other 60%,
especially news content, right?
Right, and some people are clicking. There's more than 50% clicking play. And where are they clicking play? What apps? Well, there's a few apps that run higher on click play rates than others do, but
Spotify, right?
Oh, I like the conversation about Spotify that happened this week too. about the claim eMarketer had on their dominance. And talk to podcast companies. They didn't talk to us.
Dominance in
That
what you
they're,
share with everybody.
the essence. Let me go here, see if I can find it. I don't want to talk about it incorrectly, but they essentially claimed. Let me go down here, see if I can find it. Basically they made a claim that Spotify is bigger than Apple Podcast.
Oh, they've been making that claim about users for a long time, but they
yeah.
certainly can never claim that there's more downloads happening in Spotify versus Apple. So, yeah.
It says Spotify will widen lead over Apple Podcasts. That was the title. Spotify overtook Apple
That
Podcasts
is so deceptive.
as the biggest U.S. podcast platform when the Swedish company drew 28.3 million monthly U.S. listeners.
Listeners. See, that's the thing. It's a listener number, not a consumption number. It's like a 4-to-1 ratio, and how many downloads move through Apple versus Spotify. So you can have 10 million listeners that listen to one episode a week,
right,
and make that claim, right?
Yeah.
Or compare that to 1 million users on Apple that download 10 episodes a week.
Right.
That's kind of the distinction you're talking about.
So it's definitely not apples to oranges, but the 300 million or so downloads that we measure every month, there is, 8%, 8% of that goes to Spotify. So, and it doesn't, okay. So again, listeners. Okay. I don't believe it.
Yeah. Well,
but if you have Joe Rogan, it's making 12.5 million per episode listeners.
Well, if they didn't have Joe Rogan, they couldn't even probably have this conversation at all.
So,
right.
So Joe Rogan makes up half of this, nearly half of this 28 million. They got some other big players there, some big shows. Let's say that makes up another 5 million. So 17 million listeners.
Right.
This is only monthly, 28.3 million monthly. Well, I'm going to have to run a report and see how many I'm going to have to do. If you look at a 24-hour period or maybe a 3-day period, you can go and look at unique IPs and you can get a pretty good idea. You'd have to extrapolate it out. Can't look at it over 30 days because people's mobile IP changes too much, but maybe in just a 24-hour look and extrapolate that to 30 days, you could kind of figure out what the number of listeners on a daily basis an average platform has. Pick a day of the week, pick Tuesday, and look at all the unique IPs, divide that out on how many went to Apple, how many went to Pocket Cast, how many went to Overcast, how many went to Spotify, and break that out, and we can get a night. You maybe do 3 or 4 or 5 separate days and do an averaging, and you can kind of get an idea where the numbers at. There's no way eMarketer can know this data. They don't have this data. They don't have it. They're using other stuff to get this number.
Right.
The only people that can really, truly tell that story is you, me, Podbean, all the different hosts.
Right, that actually
has the actual data.
Actual real data.
The real data. And it's still not going to be perfect. But if you do enough samples across the month, maybe you do 10 days.
Right.
Because the problem, though, is IPs change, so it gets more difficult. But you'd have to just do the percentages each day and then look at it and average the percentages to be able to get a rough.
Right. Hey, Todd, have you ever broken out on your platform or have a way to break out on your platform? How many shows have been created on a gender basis? Like like male hosted, female hosted, all that stuff. And
we
the
don't-
reason I raised this is that Pod News had in here a listing that I guess the Evox folks out of Spain, which is a fairly large Spanish-based podcast hosting and listening platform, has said that 43% of all podcasts created in 2021 on their platform, I said 43%, almost half, were created by women in 2021.
We don't do a ask if someone's male, female, they're
Right.
if they're binary or whatever.
Mhm.
But I will say that in my and this is
I'd say
not,
it's higher than that.
I think so. I think more than 50% are being created by women. Tom says, you can't possibly address this by running a report on your hosting data. You don't measure the Spotify exclusive. No, we don't. But we can see,
That's true.
we can see outside of we can look at so I guess we'll have to define that report as average podcasters. And you have to throw out the exclusives.
Right.
So that definitely is going to drive their listener number up.
Right. Joe Rogan and there are other shows that are only hosted on their platform.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's so unless Spotify was willing to give us that data, which I doubt, but I just still don't think so. Not, you guys are doing a heck of a lot more downloads a month than we are. Podbean is doing, in the ecosphere. If I'm measuring 300 million, I can get a pretty good idea what it looks like for the average non-exclusive podcaster for listener audience share. We should be able to come up with that number because until Spotify actually says Joe Rogan had 12.5 million listeners this month, and if they come out and report that, then you can throw that in, you can factor that in. But
right,
anyone can post a number. I saw a number on a podcaster's website the other day that I laughed at. Podcast host website, and I'm like, I did the math. They were making a claim on number of episodes created from the time they've been in business. If you just do the math, divide the number they posted by the number of years they've been in business down to a daily number,
right,
this company would have to be creating 60 million episodes a day.
That's not a trivial number.
That's not a trivial number, and it told me that the infographic they put on their website was total bullshit. That they just made a number up. No one did the math of this divided by this divided by this by this to come up with the average number of episode days, and you're like, I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think so. But it sure looks, it's an impressive number. Very impressive.
Yeah. It's true.
So, when you start looking at claims, at least try to get it within reason. Like
Right.
60,000 episodes a day or 25,000 episodes a day or 50,000, not 60 million.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I saw in the news too that Blueberry unveiled its new audience survey platform.
We've
What you tell us about that?
All right, so we've been allowing podcasters to do audience survey for years. It's a basic demo survey, 13 questions, age, are you married? How much do you make? And those basic questions. It's the minimum.
Get an idea of who's listening.
Yeah, minimum amount of data. And we've had that in existence really since a platform existed.
Right.
So what we did is we rebuilt it, modified, because some of the stuff that we were asking was we were asking questions that were holdover from how much are you spending on the internet a year? 1,000. I think our top thing was like 2,500 a year or something like that. People are spending $2,500 a month on the internet a month right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
some of those questions really were not, viable anymore. So we got rid of some of that stuff and then redid it. Long story short, what we're going to do is currently it's only exportable via CSV like it was, but my dev team is now working on a graphical representation of that data. So in our stats system, there's a new audience tab that when we roll the UX out, which will happen over the next month or so, is it will show you're split between male, female, married. It's going to give you a graphical view of that survey result, and you'll be able to set a time. Basically, you'll be able to set, in the last 90 days,
Mm-hmm.
the respondents for the last 90 days or the last year. For me, I'll have to go and actually set time frames because I run the thing annually, and the data changes from year to year. So we've got to be able, they can see all time, or they can look at chunks of it, and that will be data that they'll be able to. It'll be in a form which they can pull right out and put in a media kit. So it's basically right in it's an audience section, and it'll have a graphical view of those results. They'll still be able to export it via CSV and look at it that way. But we added some other components to it where the person can do a shout out to the show and give permission for that to be tweeted, or they can tweet it themselves or post it to Facebook. So there's some social sharing functions within it for the audience member to be able to easily promote the show from within the end of the survey. And it's really, the end of the survey is not really, it's just basically, do you have something to say to the host? And do you want to give them a shout out? And then the shout out is the one piece that will be able to be tweeted or sent to Facebook or whatever. So that's one of the things that we've been, it's just, again, incremental stuff and making it easier for podcasters to understand and analyze their audience.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, did you see this new audio mixer that's come out? It's out from a company called A10. It's called the Podcast AI Audio Mixer Mic Live, which I guess it's got a bunch of AI optimized audio enhancement capability inside of this little mixer that I guess dynamically modifies or optimizes your audio in real time based on what it gathers from the quality of your audio, I guess. So
is it
AI is coming to lots of things, it sounds like.
So it's are you talking about the 6-channel UC800 from A10? Is that the one?
Yep.
So
that's the one.
All right, I have got.
No, it's the UC8000.
Oh yeah, UC8000. Sorry.
Right.
Let me bring this up on the screen. So I've got it. You can't see it, Rob, but I've got it up here. It says, Jingle Pad saves 8 sound effects. Okay, sounds like the Rodecaster. The auto ducking functions lower background music anytime one speaks, ensuring speaker's voice is always heard. So it's got a ducking thing that the Rodecaster doesn't have.
Right.
So the first AI optimized audio mixer enhances microphone audio quality with enhanced acoustic models, smart EQ, so anyone can have a real-time high-quality recording. And you can have 6 inputs. Let's see what else. XLR input, no USB.
Yeah, so I'm curious what the smart EQ, how that really works.
That's a term that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Smart EQ.
So how can they use the term artificial intelligence here?
Because that's what people do now to get buzzwords to sell stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I guess to some degree, that's what the Dolby I/O folks are doing too, and that's what many platforms are doing it, doing this kind of stuff too, to some degree. Even Descript, and we're moving more and more into algorithms that can optimize and improve and do stuff more real time, I guess. But
$320.
We've had this kind of stuff with compressors for a long time,
right?
But those are usually based on hard coded settings, though.
Yeah.
Right. So you turn a dial, and that compression is based on what you have set it to be.
Right there. It hasn't been touched in 5 yeas. The EQ. Matter of fact, I have a picture on my phone to make sure that if it ever gets bumped, I know where to go back to.
Right, but if there's AI involved or some sort of an algorithm involved, it can dynamically adjust based on what volume levels and different types of audio environments, right? Which you wouldn't typically have unless you're doing portable recordings.
Yeah. Well, they got some code in there that does something based on a certain amount of rules. And
right. Yeah.
If anybody buys one of these, let us know what you think of it. I'm not going to go buy one.
Yeah, I'm not. I've got plenty of gear.
I
know you do too.
Yeah, too much. When nothing gets replaced until it breaks.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but I think it's interesting. I think we are going to see more and more products like this and services that are claiming to be AI enabled more and more as I think we look to the future of podcasting. And I guess one of the things that we have to be clear is how is AI actually adding to this, or is it just a buzzword? Right.
I think it's in a little device is $320. It's code. And there's definitely not an AI inside this $320 6-channel device with 2 inputs for XLRs.
So I guess it depends on what you consider to be AI, right? What is artificial intelligence?
Well,
what's the pure definition of it in this context? I guess.
What does Google say here?
All right.
Is the ability of a computer or robot controlled by a computer to do tasks that are usually done by humans because they require human intelligence and discernment.
Right.
So I guess it's the ability of a computer or code to do tasks that are usually done by humans. So if you think about it, EQ and compression and all that is something I would normally dial in.
Right, via a setting on a dial, right? There's levels
mm-hmm.
of compression, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's no, on those devices, there's no software that adjusts those levels, right? And is that I think that's what we're talking about, right?
When I moved from Hawaii to here, and I went into a studio that was absolute quiet, before I was in a spare bedroom in the back of the house, and there would be a weed, because I had windows open because I didn't have air con, and there would be weed whackers running, and so I had my compression really heavy. Had it really cranked up so that unless I was on the mic, it wasn't breaking to go to the recording. Here in this studio, I've done all the work to make it, and I was able to dial the compression way back because there's no noise except when they were building a building next door and grinding the floor with a sander where I needed, and matter of fact, the next weed shop's starting construction next week. So we'll probably have some banging again.
Hey, Todd, have you noticed something that's missing from my recording?
No. What is missing?
Trains.
Oh yeah. but what has arrived in your recordings is
echo.
Is echo. So I'm going to give you a little advice here. There's a great company.
Is there now?
Yep, that does absolutely fabulous work. And you should talk to the folks over at Audimute, AUDIMUTE.
I'm very familiar with Audimute.
Talk to Kevin over there, and KEAVAN. Talk to Kevin over there and get yourself some sound panels and you can even make them a design like the new media
Todd,
show.
I thought that you could get me a deal on that because I thought you had a close relationship with
I just gave you the deal. You call him and you tell him, hey, I do the new media show with Todd. I need some sound panels for my room and I want it to look cool. So
Right.
That, end up having this awesome bachelor's pad. You got to tell him that I have an office, and it's but I gotta keep things looking neat, and he'll hook you up.
Right. Well, I just haven't hung pictures on my wall yet.
It's
either,
not going to
so-
help.
It's not going to help.
It's not going to help that much.
Oh, okay. Well, I've got a wall of monitors in front of me that doesn't help either.
Well,
so.
no, but the walls behind you, if you put pictures up, unless they're not enclosed in glass, if they're just pictures with no, it'll still reflect.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Well, we'll see how it sounds when you get some more pictures hung.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to fill the walls.
Yeah, you got to go to IKEA and buy some furniture to put back there. Some books would help.
Oh, I've already taken a few trips to IKEA too. I got some lights. So
yeah, I don't buy IKEA furniture, but their accoutrements are pretty nice.
Yeah, they're designer, right? Yes.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
The best place to go for finding stuff like that. What's it called? Let me see. Here is it. Oh man, I bought all the furniture for in here. There, it starts with a W. Oh my God. Buy furniture online. Let's see if I can Google that. See if I can find their Google ad. It's horrible when you forget the company's name. Wayfair. Wayfair is the place to go.
Wayfair, yeah.
And get a pro account.
Well, you can also go to art.com and you can get a bunch of pictures there too.
Yeah, Etsy too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a big window to my right and I have a big window to my left. So it actually is a perfect, to let natural light in.
Well, you can just you don't want natural light. You want to put
you want a little bit of it.
You want to put curtains over that and blackouts, and then have your studio lights set at 5600.
Right. There you go. That's right.
But you do have a nice blueberry light in the back of your.
I got a blueberry.
Yeah, I know.
Nice little connection there.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Considering Libsyn is green, I don't think you want to have green color in your.
Here we go.
You're going to change it.
That. I can change that on the fly.
Oh, see, here we go. So those of you that aren't watching, let me go ahead and switch Rob up to primary so you can see what he's about to do here. Oh, yeah. There you go. Now you got the Libsyn green.
Since you called me out for it.
That's right. So you got the Libsyn green going on there. So
right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So it's
the power of a mobile app.
That's right, and a device that has a LED light that's under control.
So Todd, did you see the Apple presentation with their new products?
I was hot and heavy in meetings and for stuff that we're announcing next week, and no, I did not. But I went through and saw this new $1,999 studio monstrosity, and I'm thinking I'm just gonna stick with my Mac Mini and my iMac. Wow, but if anybody wants to gift us one though, we'd be happy to. Apple, you listening? You want to? We could do a deal. Rob and I will talk about that every show for a while. Send us both. He needs one more than me. Need to get him off Microsoft.
You're saying I need a Mac. Is that
That's
what you're
right. You that would be a cool way to get you switched off of Microsoft products.
Oh, there you go. Well, I've got an iPhone, so I'm halfway there, right?
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of bad because, it used to be I was a completely PC guy.
I know. I remember those days.
And a couple of things happened, and
Microsoft as a company has done pretty well the last couple of years.
Yeah, Apple's gotten a lot of my money over the past 10 years.
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny, the trash can Mac Pro that I have, because I have, I don't know how many years I've been running it. Knock on wood, it runs a lot longer how much it cost. I think I'm still depreciating it with my taxes. It costs that much. This Mac Mini that I have sitting here with the M1 processor in it encodes as fast as that trash can does. So, there's no reason for me to buy a studio. I'd rather have one of those monitors that they've come out with.
Right.
But again, I've had high-end color-corrected monitors, and I don't do color correction. So what's the use of having a $2,000 color-corrected monitor? And that's not my business. I don't need to be in that business. It's stupid money to spend.
Right. Hey, Todd, one thing, I can't remember if we've talked about the whole deal with Spotify buying Chartable and Podsites.
Yeah, we did on the last show.
Did we talk about it a little bit?
Yeah.
I was just, it's kind of interesting. I think that was an effort on the part of Spotify to try and think that they're going to basically buy the ownership of the podcast advertising business in the medium.
For me, I'm going to be quite frank. It was the best news I could have heard in a long time. Yeah. I'm glad they're taking Chartable off the table.
Well, I think that the Podsites folks is still going to remain a tool that external podcasts utilize.
Chartable was more of a competitor to my statistics platform than Podsites was. So
right.
Podtrack and us are both going to benefit from Chartable, basically only going to be available to Megaphone podcasters.
I do think that it was an effort on Spotify's part to think that they could buy a significant chunk of the medium. I think the counter argument to that is that it opens up an opportunity for a couple of new companies.
It does,
right.
But here's everyone's saying they were independent.
Right.
Well, not completely. They weren't completely. Chartable was being paid by media buyers.
Right.
So they weren't completely independent, and it's understandable. But at the same time, Podtrack spun into two companies, and it was trying to keep the measurement side separated from the sales side, but it's the same people. We talked about spinning off our stats at one time and making it appear to be its own independent company. And, we decided, no, that's dumb, because it'll be the same exact people answering the phone for Blueberry as it would be for the people answering the phone for the measurement side. So we never split the product.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the stuff I had, it's no secret. It's a lot of the stuff I've asked our users, what are you using at Chartable that you can't live without? If Chartable went away today, that you would need from us. And we've gotten some feedback, and it's doesn't have to be. This is just a business opportunity for us and others.
Yeah, right. I think it is too. So I'm sure you've heard of the name John Gruber, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been a blogger. I think he was blogging about Apple, but he's been really kind of a tech blogger for a long time. He's quoted in saying, Spotify isn't just trying to become the biggest name in podcasting, which has therefore been, but may no longer be Apple. So he's making a claim that Spotify is kind of possibly bigger than Apple now when it comes to podcasting, which I don't agree. But Spotify is trying to usurp podcasting as we know it, one of the last and brightest bastions of open, simple, private, transparent internet, and turn it into a privately owned, gated, complicated, invasive, utterly closed platform. Spotify is trying to do to podcasting what Facebook did to having your own website.
Ding,
That's
ding,
an interesting quote.
Ding, 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 ding.
John has always been rather blunt.
Love it. Him and we have to have a beer with him. I hope he's coming to Podcast Movement.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I know, but it's, we see what they're trying to do here, but, the guys over that do the not Barletta, I apologize, I'm forgetting his name here, the guy that does the Sounds Exchange newsletter.
Oh, Sounds Profitable?
Sounds Profitable. Brian
Burletta.
Yeah. So sorry, Brian. He's like, well, there's no more independent voice. And, he was on that pretty heavy after that announcement. But there's never been truly 100% independent. There's always been some conflict. So, in my opinion, there has, so, but I think it's true. We're giving a lot of data, by consuming podcasts on some of these platforms. We're giving, our listeners are giving a lot of data to them. But I contend we wouldn't be growing without these platforms. So it's a give and take. And we can't go and stick our heads in the sand and say, oh my God, because they now have all the data on listeners. So they already did. They've got usernames and zip codes and credit cards, and they already know who their audience is. But I believe that's what they're doing, is they're going to use this to try to see who else is a target for bringing into the exclusivity barrel.
Yeah, it's a way to find shows that can be exploited by
they're up and coming.
The Spotify platform. They can bring them in as exclusives. It's a way to identify, because a lot of this stuff, as we both know, and all the people listening to this know, is a lot of the data on shows out there is confidential, right? It's not publicly available. So a lot of platforms don't know the shows that are, what their numbers are, unless they want to disclose them.
And I will contend there might be room now for podcasters that want to put their numbers out there. Maybe they should. Our big issue before was people were doing that, and we'd look at their numbers that they were reporting publicly. Then we'd look at the stuff in our system and be like, oh,
and it didn't match.
It didn't match. So that's why we started a certification program.
Well, there are platforms, this raises a topic that we've talked about off and on for many years on this show, is that there are platforms. Look at YouTube, look at, SoundCloud, historically, Spreaker. They played actual play data right on publicly on the website as a default. Now, Spreaker, to my advice, took those numbers down, because I was pretty adamant that most podcasters don't want their numbers out there. But there is something to be said for having that out there. Well, I guess people like to share their numbers when they're high. But they don't like to share it when they're low.
Because it makes them embarrassed.
Right. And that's where the issue comes in.
It's absolutely the issue.
Right.
And you can't blame shows that don't want to show their numbers. Maybe, they're working hard to build an audience, to grow.
Right.
And it could be a detriment to them if they appeared smaller than they were. And you have a bunch of A-type personalities that are doing podcasts. And so that's why we are very adamant that, and there's a very limited number of people within our company that have access to people's podcast stats. We don't, this is, we are very concerned about the privacy of that data.
Well, because it does. Disclosure of your audience numbers does tend to breed audience growth with shows that already have audience, right? It doesn't breed growth with up and coming shows, and people will judge the show based on their numbers instead of the content.
Yep.
Right. And that's the trade-off for it. But you look at like a YouTube, and they put that stuff out. Right.
But I find that, of the 60 or 70 YouTube channels that I'm subscribed to, there are some that only get 3,000 video views. And there's other ones that get 1 million, but the difference between the quality of the content is very narrow.
Right.
It's just that show has not been found, or it isn't of a topic that people,
or isn't subscribed to as much, or click the bell, how every
right.
YouTuber claims in their show that they want their audience to click the like button and follow, right?
And subscribe or wherever the button is. You know?
Yeah. They're always pointing down, do this or do that or do something over here, right?
To kick your logarithm. Yep.
Yeah, and that's the key to driving those increased numbers.
And it's just like the data that is pulled by several services where they tell you you're ranking on Apple, you're ranking on Google, they're ranking on Spotify, and it's, to me, it's good, maybe auxiliary data, but is it going to help you grow your show? If you're ranked 82nd in your category on Apple Podcasts, is that really going to help you? It makes you feel good, but is it really going to help you grow your show? Whereas, let's say you aren't in the top 200, you're 867, then, again, either of those positions is not going to help you grow your show. It may make you say, well, I need to do better. I need to be more proactive in building my show, but is it truly going to help you grow?
Right.
And is it a indicator? I think, it probably is an indicator, but, we've already know that reviews have nothing to do with Apple ranking. I've never paid attention to Apple ranking. We've talked about on the show a dozen times. I've got shows that are doing 500,000 downloads an episode, and they're nowhere to be found in the Apple rankings. Right. Nowhere to be found. They're like, the only way you're going to find them is to Google for them.
Right.
And how's that?
Yeah.
It's not a true indication of show size.
So, Todd, I guess there's going to be some activity around podcasting at South by Southwest coming up this month.
Someone asked me if I was going to South by, and we abandoned South by 10 years ago. So what are they going to do?
There's usually a panel or two.
Oh, it's not worth paying $800 a day to stay at a hotel. And no.
So there's also talk that I'm hearing since, what's happening in the stock market right now is, valuations have dropped dramatically for many, many companies, and Spotify is one of them. I guess they've dropped in half compared to what they used to be. And I guess that's putting them in the target range of potentially Spotify could be acquired by a bigger company at some point. So there's rumors about that right now too. Like a Time Warner could buy a Spotify, or some big media company could pick up Spotify.
Hang on a second here. I got to send a message to someone. I just got shared a document.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, hang on.
See what else is going on. I think we're almost at the bottom of the hour anyway here.
Yeah.
But Podcast Movement's coming up. AMB's on March 22nd, and the Podcast Hall of Fame on March 25th, all in Los Angeles. So if you can make it to LA, I think it'll be an interesting event. Come out to. I think it's kind of podcasting's coming out party, just like, and we had Dan on the program last week. So if you haven't seen last week's episode with Dan Franks, who's one of the co-founders of Podcast Movement, I would definitely go check that out.
All right. Sorry, I just got totally sucked into something. So
distracted in the middle of the show.
I did.
Right.
Irritatingly so. I'm like, why are you changing this? I've already wrote that.
Right. So anyway.
So sorry about that. So I guess we'll do another show next week, because we're not, and then after that we're going to be in LA.
Yeah. Yep. It doesn't look like we're going to be doing a new media show at Podcast Movement.
Okay.
So just to let everybody know.
Can't win them all.
Nope, not this time anyway. But we are on the docket for Dallas in the summer.
Okay. That works good.
Up on the main stage.
On the big stage.
On the big stage. That's the event to have it at anyway.
All right.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay, well, we can pull the plug, get out of here since I got distracted. That's what you should never do is look at Slack messages during a live show. So
right. Well, you have to be able to multitask, right?
Well, this one is like took my attention away. I was like, no.
Yeah. Though I would love it on the show, Todd, if we could with this show get a couple of sponsors or whatever to the show. I think it would be cool to play around with these models a little bit. Now, granted, it doesn't. There's nobody really doing this quite well with dynamic insertion content. So, like shows that we do like this, right? How could dynamic ad insertion work with a show like ours?
We just have to find find the spots where they would go.
Right, and it would be a post production published dynamic insertion on the audio side. Right.
Yeah, I would just need to know the marker spot that we wanted it to go during the
show. Then we would pause during our production.
You wouldn't even have to pause. Because you can build the pause into the pre-roll.
Yeah, it's good to kind of build like transition points in the content, though.
But you can't make it sound like it's a transition.
No, you can't, because there may not be an ad there. So
yeah.
It's got to be like between us changing a topic, I think, is what it would be probably.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Todd.
If you guys somebody wants to advertise, let us know. We will happily entertain your advertisement. I don't think we would be up for advertising another podcast hosting company, but anything other than that, I think we would be good. So,
right.
And if it is another podcast hosting company, you're gonna pay big. A number
either way.
A number you can't afford.
Right. Yeah. Pay through the nose.
Yeah. How much to run my spot for my podcast hosting company? $800,000 per episode.
Well, this show, at least historically, reaches a fairly good chunk of the podcast community.
Yeah, those that care.
Right.
And the thing is, everyone that listens probably already has a show, minus a few people that are industry people.
I would think it's on the scale of the reach of Pod News, right?
Yeah, we're pretty close to that. I think they're up to 23,000. We're not that high, but
yeah.
So, okay.
All right.
Everyone, thanks. I'm Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News on Twitter.
I can be found on Twitter too at Rob Greenlee, and that's with 2 E's. And I can be reached via email, robg@libsyn.com. And I do have a .com, robgreenlee.com.
And next week we'll have lots to talk about. It's about stuff Blueberry's releasing next week. So
it's the big week.
It's the big week. Yeah, culmination of things. Okay, everyone, thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.